The forest was silent in a way that felt wrong, not peaceful, not calm, but waiting, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Bella felt it before she heard anything. That thin crack in the air that didn't belong to the wind. Edward stopped walking in the same instant, his golden eyes darkening, not with fear but with recognition. Something old, something buried had just stirred, and it had said their names without the sound. Renesmee tightened her grip on Bella's hand, her eyes distant, unfocused, as if she were listening to a voice no one else could hear. Jacob shifted uneasily, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Even though there was no enemy in sight, the night was too still. Forks had never been this quiet, not even before a storm, and Edward knew silence like this meant only one thing: the world was about to remember something it was never supposed to. 3 days earlier the vision had started, not Alice's this time, but Renesmee's dreams, twisted, fragmented flashes of fire and marble blood that didn't fall, shadows that moved without bodies, and a crown shattered into ash. Bella had tried to ignore it at first, convinced it was just her daughter's imagination growing stronger, but Edward heard the truth behind it. The thoughts Renesmee didn't know how to hide yet, and they terrified him because they weren't dreams, they were memories, not hers but someone else's, leaking through time. In Volturi, deep beneath stone, older than the city itself, a chamber long sealed had opened. The Volturi believed themselves eternal, but eternity had a beginning, and beginnings have creators. Aro stood frozen, his pale fingers trembling over a scroll so old it crumbled at the edges, his smile gone for the first time in centuries. This wasn't prophecy, this wasn't a warning, this was a record, and it told of covenant made before the first vampire learned to drink blood, a covenant broken the moment RenesmeeCullen was born. The child was never supposed to exist, not because she was dangerous but because she was a key. Edward felt it when it happened, a sudden pressure in his skull, like 1,000 whispers screaming at once. Every vampire on the planet paused at the same moment, hearing a word they didn't understand but felt in their bones: the veil. Bella dropped to her knees, gripping her head, pain tearing through her shield in violent waves. Something was trying to push through her, something ancient and furious, testing her strength. Edward knelt beside her, holding her face, his voice calm but his mind racing, because whatever this was, it wasn't attacking, it was searching, and it was using Bella as a door. Renesmee screamed, and the forest answered, trees cracking, earth splitting. Jacob lunged toward her just as a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Not a vampire, not a wolf, but something in between, its eyes white, empty, and burning with hunger. It spoke without a mouth, its voice layered, overlapping like many throats, sharing one breath: the blood that walks, the heart that beats, the shield that blocks. You have what was taken. Edward didn't hesitate, he tore through the thing, but his hands passed through smoke, the shadow reforming instantly. Amused, Bella realized then with chilling clarity, this wasn't an enemy you could kill, it was a messenger, and messengers only come before war. Back in Volturi, Aro made the most dangerous decision of his existence. He smiled again and ordered the guard to prepare, not for judgment but for alliance, because the record spoke clearly: when the veil opens, the Volturi do not rule, they kneel or they burn. Carlyle read the ancient texts in silence, his expression grave. This wasn't about law or balance anymore, this was about survival. The first vampires had not been kings or monsters, they had been wardens, created to seal something away, something that fed on both human and vampire blood, something that learned, adapted, evolved, and now, after centuries of waiting, it had found the one thing that could open the lock. Renesmee. Edward watched his daughter sleep that night, knowing with terrifying certainty the world wasn't hunting her because she was different, it was hunting her because she was necessary, and for the first time since he became a vampire he wished desperately that he could still be human enough to pray. Far away, beyond forests and cities, beyond memory itself, the veil cracked wider, and something smiled, because the Cullens had finally noticed, and noticing was the first step towards surrender. The wind shifted, and with it came a whisper of movement. Bella felt the hairs on her neck rise the way they did before a storm, only this storm was invisible. It carried no rain, only the weight of expectation. Edward held her tighter as the shadows around them seemed to pulse like living veins. The veil was stretching further now, and with it came glimpses of a world not their own, a place of pale skies and rivers of silver blood. Renesmee stirred in her sleep, her eyes flashing like molten gold, as if she were were seeing the truth behind the truth that humans and vampires alike could never comprehend. Jacob growled low, his instincts screaming at him to protect but also warning him this was bigger than anything he had faced before. His wolf sensed the other presences, countless, watching, waiting, some curious, some hungry, and none of them loyal to anything but the rules older than time itself. A flicker of white light moved across the treetops, and Jacob felt a pang of fear deeper than any fight he had known. This was a war of knowledge and survival, not claws and teeth. The Volturi arrived at Forks under the guise of night, but their presence wasn't noticed immediately. The city seemed to breathe around them, and even the humans slept unaware as Aro's eyes glimmered with the hunger of curiosity mixed with dread. They had expected to find a key, a child of power, but what they found was a nexus, a doorway to the first covenant itself. Elena, their most loyal guard, whispered warnings, but even she could not predict the shifting tides. The Cullens stepped forward, united but tense, the history between them and the Volturi thick like blood on steel. Renesmee awoke screaming, not from pain but from vision. Her mind projected images of the ancient world, the first vampires kneeling before creatures of light and shadow, beings that existed before the first humans and watched over the creation of immortality itself. Bella and Edward tried to soothe her, but the screams of the past were beyond comfort. Their daughter's powers now revealed themselves in full, and the forest around Forks seemed to warp as if reality itself obeyed her unspoken command. Carlisle, thinking fast, realized that what the child was seeing could not only predict but also rewrite the future. Aro stepped forward, his smile cold and distant. She holds the key not to power but to choice, he said, voice echoing unnaturally across the clearing. And choices, Edward answered without hesitation, will decide who survives. For the first time, centuries of diplomacy, control, and fear were useless. Aro's pale hand trembled as he acknowledged the truth that even he could not dominate this new force. The shadows in the forest grew taller, twisting into forms that mimicked the Cullens, the wolves, even the Volturi themselves. They whispered secrets too old to remember, promises too dark to name. The air thickened, hearts pounded, and for a moment every living thing felt the same heartbeat, the same pull of destiny, like a tide dragging them all toward an inevitable collision. The world held its breath, and the first step was taken. Suddenly Renesmee rose, her tiny frame glowing faintly but fiercely. She spoke not with words but with thoughts. The first ripple of power spilling into the night. Do not fight, do not fear, open the way or be crushed. The Cullens felt it in their bones as the ground beneath them cracked slightly, revealing an ancient stone door etched with runes older than anything in the Volturi archives. Edward and Bella exchanged a glance, understanding instantly that the child's command was absolute. She was the bridge, the inheritor of the Covenant, the reason why centuries of secrecy had mattered. Aro's eyes narrowed, fear and fascination battling within him. He realized the war he had prepared for, the judgment he had summoned, was irrelevant. She could summon the first vampires themselves if she wished, rewrite the rules that bound them all. The night grew colder, the shadows sharper, the whispers louder, and the veil thinned until the forest seemed unreal, a place between worlds. Jacob growled again but did not attack. Instead he sensed the balance shifting, saw Renesmee's hand lift slightly, and the shadows recoiling. The wolves joined her silently, instinct recognizing instinct. She was not an enemy but a herald of force demanding recognition and fear in equal measure. The Volturi knelt, not in submission to child but to destiny. Aro felt the weight of all history pressing on him, centuries of arrogance stripped away by a single life. Bella held Edward's hand tightly, her heart full of awe and terror and hope simultaneously. They had survived wars, threats, betrayals, but this was different. This was the birth of a new age, a choice made not by law or fear but by power and love entwined. And then the forest fell silent once again. The veil closed but its echo lingered, A promise that the world had changed forever that night. Forks slept under the stars, unaware that immortality had been rewritten, that the child they called Renesmee held within her hands the key to creation and destruction, and that some doors, once opened, could never be closed again.